Well, hello everybody. This is Seth from the RE Tipster blog, and I have the distinct privilege today of speaking with Becky Hammond, who is a Gallup Certified Strengths Coach. And the reason I want to bring Becky on today is because I think it's really interesting. I think we all have strengths that we're inherently born with, but for many of us, we never really figure out what those are, like very specifically, or if we do figure them out, it's not until later in life after we've lived, a lot of our best years. And just speaking for myself, I mean, I just sort of recently figured out what some of my strengths are through the work that Becky does. And this is stuff that if I could have known this like a decade ago, man, I feel like life would have been a lot more fun, a lot more enriching if I had just been aware of the things that I'm naturally good at. And I just thought Becky would be a really good person to bring on here and just sort of share some thoughts with us about her work. So Becky, I guess if you wouldn't mind, the name of your company is called Isogo. Is that right?
That's right. Isogo.
Okay. And you administer, is it called the Strengths Finder test? Is that what it's called?
Right. Yep. There's a Gallup, the Gallup organization, the pollster and the big research conglomerate has an assessment called Strengths Finder. And I use the power of that to uncover and discover people's talents and then help them develop those in their everyday work and their everyday life.
Okay. Awesome. And how did you get into this line of work?
I have to say this line of work started in my kitchen about 8 years ago.
Okay.
My husband and I came upon a leadership conference that we both attended. At that conference, we both took the StrengthsFinder assessment as well as another personality type indicator assessment. And the simplicity of it all of a sudden opened our eyes to conflict that we were having together. We had been married about 7 years at the time, and we would have the same conflict kind of over and over, where I would be kind of hard charging, doing things, we would be unwinding from our day, and I would still be checking off my to-do list and working on things for tomorrow and making dinner and lunch and working on dishes. And he would kind of prop up on the counter with a glass of water and chat about his day. And from my perspective, I was engaging with him, but just frustrated by the fact that he wasn't jumping in to help. And from his perspective, I had my back turned to him. I didn't turn around and look at him in the eyes. And from his perspective, he's like, man, if you just turned around and looked at me, our relationship could be so much deeper. And so I'm looking for help and having frustration and moving things forward. And he's having frustration in the way that we're connecting. And we come to find out that one of my greatest talents that I bring is called achiever, which provides stamina and drive and momentum and just kind of an ability to get things done. And his number one strength is called relator, who strives for and creates naturally deep one-on-one connections with people. And he does his best work when he works hard alongside other people. And so when we realized this, I mean, it really wasn't rocket science. It was just like, oh my goodness, how could we have missed this for so long, that we're wired in these ways, and that if we can meet each other's needs in those things, each of us can thrive in those strengths, and we can, our relationship can move forward together stronger. That's where I would say this kind of how I entered into this line of work. And then as I started applying that past my personal relationships and started applying it to my role as a manager at a time in a for-profit healthcare organization here in Southern California, I was thrust into management pretty quickly and was grasping for tools and realized that the only way that I was going to help my team be successful in their drastically different approaches was to help them understand where their talents were, where their strengths were, how they could individually get to the same goals. We all had to get to the same goals, but we needed to get there in a way that aligned with our strengths and made sense with the way that we were wired. And, I started doing that, and it was kind of amazing. It worked. And so, at that point, we had the opportunity to live in Japan for 3 years. And as we were transitioning back to the States, this concept of StrengthsFinder and helping organizations achieve the business results, helping people, individuals, entrepreneurs, business owners achieve the business results that could come from concentrating on their strengths. I couldn't get it out of my mind. And so the town that we lived in Japan, was named Isogo. And that's where that Isogo name comes from.
Okay.
That where this concept and idea was born of me helping people identify what their talents and strengths are and apply them to their everyday work and everyday life so they can achieve their success in their roles and their teams and their relationships that that they strive for in a way that makes the most sense to the way that they're wired.
Okay, awesome. So when you think of the people that you work with, is it mostly corporate clients, or what kind of people will come to you because they want your help, and how do they realize that they need your help?
Yeah, well, that's a business challenge for me. How do people realize that they need my help? I think part of it, I think the most successful clients that I've had already kind of have a bug in their ear about StrengthsFinder.
Okay.
I would say there's a couple different types of clients that I work with that I love working with. One is teams. I help people, individuals discover their talents and then develop their teams based on self-awareness, others' awareness, so recognizing the strengths in the people around them, and then how do you integrate those things into work and life. And then the other group of people are individuals that kind of want to up their game, solopreneurs, business owners, people who just kind of in their everyday life are looking to hone their strengths to be able to be more successful in a way that makes sense to them. So yes, corporate clients, and then also individuals who are kind of looking to up their game.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. And I know the first time I ever talked to you about this kind of work that you do, it just kind of occurred to me that, there were a lot of people that I have worked with, like just for example, in my banking career in the corporate world, where I know that certain people are just very, very good at certain things. And I'm also good at certain things, but they're different things. Like they don't really align, and we don't communicate the same way. And it feels like we're always butting heads. And like, it doesn't need to be that way. It's more of a matter of just understanding, like, how can we sort of use each other's strengths to benefit the organization as a whole and benefit each other. And a lot of that understanding, I think, comes from the kind of work that you do. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. I think some of the most eye-opening and profound aha moments that people get are around understanding the strengths of the people around them. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely fun and eye-opening to look at your own strengths, and you start to see like, oh man, yeah, I could really leverage this in this area, or, I didn't realize that other people didn't think like this. I didn't realize that other people maybe didn't have goals or a need to just kind of stay focused on the main thing. So that's kind of one level. And then the next level is, I like to say that it kind of like brings out or makes sense of kind of the quirks or idiosyncrasies that we see in the people around us. Like, oh, that's why you were driving me crazy in that way. Somebody who is very deliberative by nature is somebody who assesses risk really well. They make really great decisions. And oftentimes, especially in our kind of fast-paced society, we can feel frustrated. Other people with a different filter can feel frustrated that they are making decisions too slowly, that they're not willing to just kind of jump on top of things and move forward. And so when you realize that somebody on your team, let's say, comes to life with a perspective of having talent in this kind of deliberative theme, then you can realize when you can call on them. Like, oh man, if we have a decision that really requires forward thinking and risk analysis, we want to bring this person in on it. And then also realize that when they're in a meeting, just because they're not jumping right in with their input doesn't mean that they aren't going to have input if you give them a couple extra beats to think through it. And oftentimes their input is going to be one of the most valuable because they have that strength in being able to think through the future implications of a decision. Yeah. So I think it is absolutely eye-opening for people. It helps eliminate a lot of the frustration and strife that people experience in a workplace, whether it's, you with a manager or you with a teammate or a manager to, people that they're trying to motivate to get to do things underneath them. As a manager, it can be very frustrating. Like, why don't you just do it? It's like, well, people don't just do things. They have to be motivated intrinsically. And this is a tool to help understand what their filter is like and how to get to that intrinsic motivation.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said something there that kind of resonated with me. I know in the real estate investing world, a lot of us are solopreneurs. We're doing things by ourselves. We're out there trying to find opportunities. And I've heard more than one person in this space say that it's really important to sort of arm yourself with as many tools as you possibly can, like learn as many different approaches and techniques to, buying properties and all that. And funny thing is, what I heard you say was it's almost like you can use other people's talents as tools as well. It's not necessarily just yourself. It's kind of a matter of understanding, okay, what are the strengths of the people around me, and when can I draw on those resources to step in and help me as well? It's not necessarily just about what I'm good at. It's about what are the people around me good at, and who could I hire or bring into the mix that would help me reach that end goal. That's a pretty big kind of aha moment for me, just talking to you right now.
Yeah, well, that's great. I like aha moments. But I think that's absolutely right on. And I think, as a solopreneur, I'm a solo independent business owner myself. So this is something that I've applied back on myself as well. And I think it's not even necessarily hiring people, though, I have, looked around for people to assist me in certain ways from a hiring perspective, but also it's kind of the colleagues and the partners that are out there, it's people that I recognize as having a different set of strengths than I do. There's a good colleague of mine, Erin Passons, who's brilliant, a communicator, and she's a really great strategic thinker. So when I have a decision to make, or I'm trying to think through like how to navigate an obstacle that, let's say, a client throws in, like, by the way, your live workshop is actually going to also be shown remotely to 35 people. Like, okay, for me, like, I'm like, oh no, what do I do? Like, I already have my curriculum beautifully prepared, but it has to do with, interacting with people. And when there's half the group is interacting and half the group is, sitting in their cubicles somewhere throughout the campus, like, how do we make that happen? And so I've realized that I can call on her kind of strategic mind. Her mind can more easily kind of jump the lily pads to get to the right answer than mine can. And so I engage with her, even as somebody who's in my own business, I engage with her to kind of help me work through those obstacles. And, there's also just friends and family that I know I can call on for certain things that I just don't do as well, even from a business perspective.
Sure. That's very interesting. So, like, I guess when people, and I'm not sure if you can really quantify it this way or not, but like when people understand what their strengths are and how to use them and who else they can work with and all of that and how they can work with those people, like what is the end result of all this? Like, do people tend to make more money, or do they just enjoy their life and their work more, or get some better result of some sort? Or like, what's the end goal, if you can succinctly put that in any way?
Yeah, yes is the answer. All those things. I mean, I think that there's definitely a greater sense of well-being as you are, and this is, what you said at the very beginning, you've kind of known these things are true about you, but you don't realize, like, oh man, this is unique about me. This is a strength about me. This is something that I could really be using. So there's definitely kind of an overall, sense of well-being that most people experience. I think the difference about this, a strengths-based approach to kind of getting to a place of success, is that it's individualized. We often hear, I do it myself as well in the blog space, especially, headlines are so important. It's like, oh, the the steps to success, or 7 surefire ways for reaching your goals this year, or whatever it is, you know, but really those are reflections of the people who are writing it. And if we see our strengths and the talents that we naturally have as a filter of life, you know, it's going through their filter. It's going through their, you know, from a strengths finder perspective, their top 5 talent themes, their top 5 strengths that are kind of the sieve through which those 3 steps to success are being written. And so what I love about the strengths-based approach is that it's not prescriptive. It's about how you approach the world. And so as you are approaching the world and meeting your challenges by sharpening your strengths, or choosing to use your strengths to navigate challenges and march towards your goals, or whatever success looks like to you, that ends up being the end point. The end point is I am able to be more productive, more successful, more satisfied, and more engaged in what I'm doing when I'm using my strengths to work in my everyday work and my everyday life.
Sure.
So, I mean, the stuff that I kind of geeked out on as I was figuring out, like, do I really want to kind of hang my hat on this, had to do with, you know, 14.5% increase in productivities for businesses who implement strengths as a perspective, and 12% increase in profitability, and decreased turnover, and increased sales, and like things that, and like, wait a minute, these are real business results. How in the world does everyone not just want to do this? You know, these are real live business results. So I'd say that's the end goal, is that increased productivity, engagement, satisfaction in what you're doing, that's going to get you to your place of success in a way that just feels good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess maybe you could just remind me, like, for people who want to figure out their strengths, or just get a very high level idea of, you know, what their strengths are and what they are good at, is it called the Strengths Finder test? Is that like a $10
yeah, you know
test
what?
to take?
Yeah, it's $15 now. It includes
$15,
a ebook of StrengthsFinder 2.0.
Okay.
I try not to call it a test, because, you know, some people have test anxiety and it just doesn't go well. You know, there are no right or wrong answers. It does take about, 35 to 45 minutes to thoughtfully think through some pairs of responses. So it gives you, it has you choose between things that are not true of you. Yeah. Oh yeah, this statement is more true about me. Or like, you know, I tend to have an organized closet, or I like to fly by the seat of my pants. Right. So those are, like, let's say those are 2 things that on a spectrum, and you choose which one sounds more like you. And so the assessment itself is called StrengthsFinder, and it can be taken over at GallupStrengthsCenter.com, and we can put that link up maybe in the notes there. But we it's not something that I get paid for. I mean, it's not like I get, you know, they don't have any sort of program where I, you know, get paid per click or anything like that. But it's a tool that I think is very powerful in giving you that high level view, as you say, of what your strengths actually are, from a pool of 34 talent themes. So 34 kind of clusters of talent. It gives you your top 5, the things that are the 5 things that are a part of your natural patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior. And so that's one way to start to identify what those strengths are.
Yeah. Was there a more expensive version too, where you can get more of your?
Oh yes. There's always an upsell, right? It is $89 to get your full 34 theme report. If you've already paid the $10 or $15, then I think it's $75 to to upgrade there. I think, it's very tempting. And actually most of the executives that I've worked with have said, oh yeah, I want to do that. After they see their top 5, they really are interested. Okay. What's next? And it's interesting. We do want to see what's at the bottom. And I think that's the wisdom of not seeing your full 34 at first. So the whole point of, or one of the, the main philosophies and foundations under a strengths perspective is that we're concentrating on the things that we do well, the things that come naturally to us, not the things that maybe are on the lower end of that spectrum. And what we tend to do as humans is, open a report and say like, oh, thank you, strengths, for being here. And then you flip to the bottom and you say, what's my 28 through 34? Like what things am I not good at? And there's different reasons for looking at those things. But I think one of the most powerful reasons to actually get your next report is actually to unlock those next 5. So your top 10, because I would say from my experience and from the experience of other coaches around me, we tend to operate more from this kind of a cluster of 8 to 10 talents, where, your top 5 says a lot about you, but it doesn't really say everything. And you kind of feel like, there's some things that I pull on that maybe don't show up in those top 5. So it really is valuable to have that for your top 10. But 5 is much more manageable number when you're trying to remember them, a week after you've taken the assessment.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me, earlier in my career in the banking world, it was basically determined by the authorities where I worked that I was not going to be the sales force of our company, mainly because I wasn't the most outgoing person. I didn't really spend a lot of my time striking up conversations with people and that kind of thing. Just sort of quiet in general. And I think they came to the conclusion that, okay, Seth is a terrible salesperson. He will never be that part of our company. When I think about the Strengths Finder test, I almost wonder, like, would it be unhealthy to go to the lowest, like, I guess your worst strengths, and focus on those and be like, okay, this is what I need to not do with my future because I'm not good at those things. Like, is that smart or not good to do that?
Oh, that's interesting. I think what's not smart and not good is to look at the bottom and say, how do I work on these things? Because to your point, you're probably never going to be the most natural salesperson. Now, sales is a kind of interesting thing because you can use a whole slew of talents to be a successful salesperson that maybe has nothing to do with kind of some of the more traditional, heavy influencing type talents. But it's going to take you work in a different way than maybe what your organization saw as valuable skills and talents for sales. I would say, but there is wisdom, as you're saying, to looking at the bottom of your list and saying, and kind of having a peace with it. For me, when I looked at the bottom, I had number 34 as ideation for me. People who are strong in ideation are people who can grab ideas out of thin air. They're constantly coming up with things. They are able to see the links between kind of seemingly disparate ideas. And the ideas they come up with, most of the time, they're not planning on actually executing on them. And when I saw the ideation was 34 for me, it really gave me relief because it said, oh, no wonder I suck at coming up with ideas. I love that this just validated that. And I can now rely on other people to come up with ideas or realize the ways that I do come up with ideas. Like my best ideas come from somebody having an initial idea and then I can make it better. I can grab efficiencies from it and I can actually make it happen. And so for me, it definitely was okay, now I know I don't have to concentrate on that thing. So I think you're right on. Your point is really well taken there.
Sure. Okay. Now, I know I took this Strengths Finder test, I think it was about 6-ish months ago. And when I took it, I thought it was pretty enlightening. I got it's called the Your Signature Themes report. And my top 5 were focus, futuristic, empathy, achiever, and intellection. And I guess without going into too much, I mean, there's kind of a story behind each one of those things as far as what that means.
Right.
But it's like, and I don't know what you can really tell me without knowing the intricate details of what I do every day, but just like knowing those things, like, is there something I should start doing differently? Like, should I don't know, like, what are your thoughts? What would you do if you just found out that that's what you were good at?
If these were your top five. Well, I think first it takes a little bit of exploration, like you're saying. So if are you game for kind of diving into a couple of them, and we can kind of see what that looks like?
Sure.
Okay. Tell me one that resonated the most with you.
Okay. Well, let's see here. I mean, I think they all actually resonated a lot. Like when I was reading them, they sounded pretty accurate in terms of describing, how my brain works and just who I am as a person. There were a few things that stood out that didn't necessarily jive with what I was thinking, but for the most part, it was spot on.
Okay.
And I guess I'm just trying to look at which one might be most relevant. I guess one of them is empathy. And,
okay.
I actually read through each one of these has like a paragraph or so just explaining what that means.
Right.
And for empathy, it says you can sense the emotions of those around you. You can feel what they are feeling as though their feelings are your own. And one thing I actually underlined here was this instinctive ability to understand is powerful. You hear the unvoiced questions. You anticipate the need. Where others grapple for words, you seem to find the right words and the right tone. And I don't know why, but and I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I just get that kind of thing. It just sort of makes sense to me, and I know how to do that. And I don't know if it's just because when I struggle with things, I tend to just really internalize it and kind of take it sort of hard. Like I really, really deal with it in kind of a difficult way. And that sort of makes me understand those difficulties when I see them in other people. I just really I get it, and I get where they're coming from, and I really feel for them, and I want to help them. So, I mean, knowing that, for example, about myself, like I think one way I'm sort of putting that to work is through this, through the RE Tipster blog. And that's part of why I enjoy that so much, is because I enjoy learning how to explain things to people who are struggling with certain issues and how to get over those obstacles. Can you think of anything else I should be doing knowing that?
Well, tell me about a time that you give me a specific example that you sensed what somebody was feeling, or sensed the climate in a room or whatever it was, and were able to respond.
Mm-hmm.
Well, putting you on the spot too much.
I'm trying to think of, there's tons of examples. I'm trying to think of one that would be directly relevant to, the real estate investing realm.
Sure.
One thing, for example, like when I'm trying to find new real estate deals to, purchase, one of the best ways that I know of to find these opportunities is through a direct mail campaign, putting together a solid message and sending it to a very specific group of people, and then using that, starting those interactions to eventually buy properties from those people, usually at just really, really amazing prices. But, and that's something that I talk about a lot on my blog, but that technique holds a lot of potential for mistakes, because there's several things you have to do right for it to work correctly. And it's not uncommon for me to hear from, occasional people who are like, Seth, I did this direct mail campaign and it just didn't work. I didn't get that many responses, or I did, but none of them were motivated. And it usually means that something in that process wasn't done correctly. Something or several things weren't done right. And I've had that too. Like I've also had those experiences where, you spend tons of money and time and effort on doing this direct mail campaign, and it just falls flat, and there's no results, and it's miserable. And it's just a terrible, soul crushing feeling to go through that. And it's tempting to quit, because it's really hard, and it's hard to pick yourself back up from that. And when I hear people say that to me, like, it's really hard for me to just sort of blow them off and be like, yeah, whatever, get
Mm.
lost. I don't care about you. Like my brain just doesn't work that way. I feel the pain, and I want them to get over that and not get stuck on that. Cause I know on the other side, there's amazing things waiting for them if they can just, you know, tweak what they're doing and do it better the next time. And then they'll find the results.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that example because especially when you said, you can't blow them off, I
Hmm.
think that's where that talent of empathy really comes in. It's like, somebody like me, who empathy admittedly is number 32, like I might be able to understand kind of the process that they went through and then they didn't get the results, but it doesn't kind of impact me or hit me to the core. And so what happens in that type of situation? When you say you can't blow them off, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times, I guess I'll try to dig a little bit deeper to understand, because when somebody just says, I did a direct mail campaign, like
Hmm.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
information that lives within that. Like, where did you get your list? How much did you pay for it? Who gave it to you? What format was it in? And how did you sort it? And what did you send to there's just a lot of different things that can affect it. So usually, I would try to find out the next step. Like, what did you do? Give me some vague idea of what happened and, what you think went wrong. And, and a lot of times, I mean, it kind of depends on how much time I have available to do that. But
Right.
it's hard for me to just ignore that sort of thing because I know
Right.
it's a somewhat common struggle, especially in the beginning before people sort of get in their groove and figure out what they're doing. And there's a lot of people I think who don't make it very far because they
Mm.
just make those mistakes in the beginning, and I don't want them to lose out on like a life-changing opportunity just because they took a couple missteps in the very beginning. So I guess my goal, in step two would just be to find out what did you do wrong, or just to give them some ideas of what they could try to do differently in the future.
Right. And how do you know when it's resolved? Like when does your kind of empathy superpower let you let go of what their results were?
Yeah, it sort of depends what the relationship is. Sometimes there's actually like a one-on-one, like mentoring, coaching relationship for a set period of time in which I know I'm going to hear the follow-up results and see what happened, and we can keep digging further if it still didn't work. Other times I just, if people are emailing me out of the blue and I send them suggestions and I never hear back from them, then I don't really know how it turned out. I hope for the best, but there's no way to really know for sure until somebody responds and tells me the follow up of what happened.
Hmm. And you feel like you are able to, like, does your empathy strength get in the way of um, at all? Does it ever feel like it gets in the way where it perhaps make me feel like you're hanging on to something longer than some of your other strengths maybe would tell you you should?
Um, well, I think, yeah, I mean, I would say there are times when I feel like, like I get to the end of the day and there were certain things I wanted to get done and I couldn't get those things done because I was focused trying to help somebody else
Mm-hmm.
out with something that really isn't even my problem in the end. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, there are certainly times when it kind of gets the best of me, and sometimes I kind of have to just override it and be like, sorry, this other thing is important and I have to do that first. So yeah, I mean, from that standpoint, it can become somewhat of an issue, I guess.
I mean, I think that's one of the things, and it sounds like you really have an awareness of this. And I think one of the things I love about empathy is that people who have this, and even the way you're talking about it, it's just like it's so natural that you hardly realize that it's a superpower
Yeah.
that it's a strength, that's something that you offer. I mean, the fact that you can immediately assess, how people are doing and then kind of put yourself in their shoes, even if you have not been exactly where they are, is something that, that not everybody can do. And to be able to figure out, I mean, you can kind of, there's a logical link between, you know, empathy and your personal relationships. It makes sense. It's, why people probably, why Kristen was attracted to you, because you can sense, what she's feeling and the people around her, and make her feel valued. But in business, I think you're really astute and right on to say, yeah, this is the way that it can impact me and be powerful to me. I mean, the fact that you can draw people to you because you understand, or at least can sense how they're feeling, adds to your authenticity. And, we both know that that is one of the key drivers of successful online business, especially when it's a world of cloaks and mirrors where, you can really be anyone you want. But when you are able to kind of offer that genuine concern for other people, I think, that's going to be something that really gives you leverage and power and strength and success as you're moving your business forward. So, it sounds like you're right on in that area, and just really kind of bringing it to the forefront, and making sure that that you use it and that you say, okay, yeah, this is a good, relevant, strong business strength. And then also, I think you said it yourself, like kind of using some of your other strengths to put it in check, making sure that if you're feeling that you're not following something down a rabbit hole, but rather you're still fulfilling the needs of focus and of achiever, to check things off the list and to stay targeted on the things that you're going for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I actually had a professor in college who hit on this a little bit, where he was saying kind of what you were saying earlier about how when people are strong at something, like it usually just, like, it doesn't even occur to them because it just seems so natural. Like, that's just, like, everybody's like that, right? Because I am, so it must be normal.
Right. Right.
It's sort of, it also reminded me of this quote. I think it was Einstein, where he said, everybody's a genius at something, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to live its whole life thinking that it's stupid. And that's just one of those examples of how like we all have these strengths, and it's just so important to know what those are so you can start, I guess, using them. So yeah.
Yeah. And, I think, I commend you even just for emphasizing your empathy talent. I think that's something that, I did on my Isogo TV video podcast today. Actually, I published an episode where I answer a question that I get very often, which is, what if I've been told that these things aren't strengths? So you get your top 5 strengths, and they say, they look at them and they're like, man, my whole life I've been told that these things aren't strengths. Like, okay, yeah, these things come naturally to me, but whatever, like people have said, I'm, in empathy, and especially, we have a cultural bias against empathy in men for some reason. And so there's a manager that I was working with who had empathy. It was a very successful manager and salesperson, had empathy in his top 5. And there was a clear resistance to even admitting that was something that was valuable. And even in himself, where he clearly used it to get to his place of success. And so, sometimes there is some kind of unwrapping and uncovering and unveiling that you have to do in order to kind of to understand as a fish, what you're really meant to be doing in the way that you're going to thrive. And even if it's a little bit countercultural or counter, the ethos of our society.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. Do you have any other examples of people who have, made distinct changes in their life based on the results of this assessment? And if so, like, were there any specific positive outcomes that happened? Or I don't know if you've seen any specific examples at this point or not, but
yeah. Once a person comes specifically to mind, and this I think is relevant kind of in your solopreneur, entrepreneur space. There's a guy who had worked in retail for over 30 years, and he decided he was done and wanted to kind of just launch out on his own and see what he can do. And so he ended up kind of through networking, working as making sales calls for a living, to boil it down. And he took the StrengthsFinder assessment and sat down with me a couple of years ago, and we went through everyone and realized what he realized is that he came with of course 5 themes, but 2 of them kind of stuck out. One was a ranger, which is somebody who is looking for efficiencies, can see connections between things. Sometimes it's processes, sometimes it's people that they can kind of arrange in the best way. I mean, some arrangers are really good at packing the back of a car, or designing a brochure, or figuring out the best staff to put on a team. Mm-hmm. And then the other was consistency. And consistency really has to do with fairness, has to do with processes and procedures that are in place. And what he realized is that his arranger was kind of getting was taking control. He had to kind of out on maximum superpower, so that he would spend most of his day arranging his day, where he would say, okay, these are the calls I'm going to make, and this is why it makes sense, and this is the most efficient way to do it. But consistency, having a set of policies and procedures just wasn't something that he didn't think to have as a solopreneur, somebody who was out on his own. He was successful in the retail environment where there was very clear policies and procedures. And he hadn't thought to kind of apply that concept to his own everyday work. And, he credits me with this, like, a brilliant coaching session, but really it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with his revelation about himself and saying, oh man, I need to set up policies and procedures for myself. And, not like, spending an extra week making a manual for himself, but rather saying, okay, I'm going to spend 50% of my time arranging calls and 50% of my time making calls. And it's it almost sounds like, well, yeah, but no, it wasn't, oh yeah, it was like turning down that arranger strength a little bit. If you think about him as a volume dial, turning down that arranger so that, it was satisfied with good enough efficiency in the call plan, and turning up that consistency side so that he really had something to rely on to say, okay, this is the commitment that I've made. Yeah, that feels comfortable to be able to know that this is what I'm expecting of myself, or what is required of me. And his results were just like mind-boggling. He doubled his productivity within the first couple weeks. He had made more wins within those first couple of weeks than he had in the 5 weeks prior. And he really, now this has been 2 years, he's really been able to maintain that, to be able to continue to kind of dial in those strengths and make sure that they're all getting their needs met in order to be the most productive and most efficient that he can be, to be successful on his own in his own business.
Sure. Wow, that's really cool. That's awesome. Yeah, it almost kind of sounds like analysis paralysis in a way. I know that's something that real estate investors have to struggle with a lot, is when, looking at a deal or how to proceed on something. It's like you can just kill yourself in terms of looking at numbers and whether or not to do it. At some point, you just have to take action. It sounds like that's kind of what this guy needed to do. And looks like the results were good once he started doing that.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. So I'm curious if somebody, and we've kind of covered this already, but if somebody does discover that they're just like not good at a particular theme, like, is there a particular suggestion you'd have on how to handle the types of work that requires those strengths? Or is there like, something we talk about a lot is like delegating. Like, should we find a virtual assistant to handle that kind of work? Or should we, I don't know. Is there any way we could kind of like pass that work on to somebody who's better suited to do it? Or do we just need to sort of like work harder or try to bolster that part of us that isn't good at that? Like, what would be your suggestion on how to handle those weaknesses?
I think there's a couple different ways, to approach it. There are definitely things that are required of us. And so in our jobs, that we're not that good at, that we don't love, that don't come super naturally to us. And that's true of an independent business owner, of a sideliner, of somebody who has a corporate job or is working the front line somewhere. There are things that we have to do as part of our roles that we don't necessarily want to do, and or don't feel necessarily good at. And that's one thing that strengths aren't. Strengths are not an excuse to say, oh, that's not my strength, so I'm not going to do it. But rather, when you know your strengths, you can do one of two things. One, you can figure out, how do I use my strengths to get this thing done? So maybe it's a less conventional way to do it. For my husband, who leads with Relator, he has very little in terms of kind of more executing type strengths. But when he can gather a group of people together and put people in the right places and work hard alongside them, he will be able to get things done. But when he's on his own and doesn't have that connection, he can't do it. But the people around him, one of his, the other attorneys that works with him right now, says, well, if you don't have diligence, if you don't have just kind of a get her done attitude, you can't do it. It's like, well, he disagrees. He says, well, I don't have to have diligence and a get her done attitude. I just need to have people around me in order to be able to get these things done. So it's figuring out how you can make your strengths help you do the things that maybe you don't feel as good at. And then the other part is, as you're saying, kind of delegating or hiring them out or calling in support. If it's just decision-making support and you have that analysis paralysis, maybe it's time to get somebody who is able to make kind of on their feet decisions and has a real gut about things, and just get their take on it. When you realize, okay, I've spent an hour and a half looking at these numbers, that can be your cue to say, okay, I need to get, so-and-so on the line to get their gut on this, and then go with it, versus continuing to spiral down. Financially, sometimes it's hard to kind of make those decisions. But when you can be freed to do the things that you do best, and other people can do things that they do best, and they're gonna love it. Literally, there are people who love doing accounting work. I think you might know one. It's like, oh my goodness, really? You love that? Okay, great. I would gladly hand that part of my business over, even though it requires, trust and a little bit of letting go of the control freak nature of myself, to be able then to concentrate on some of the other things that I love to do, like content creation and meeting with clients and things like that. So, it's refining your own strengths to get those things done, or bringing partners alongside you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm just curious, have you ever encountered a client or anybody who's just like, the conclusion you came to was, you are not cut out for this line of work. You need to find something else, or, you need to quit, or you're just a hopeless wreck. You need to just give up on life right now. Has that ever been your conclusion, or no?
I have never had the hopeless wreck give up on life situation. Really, it's actually been very rare. I work with a group of engineers at Qualcomm here in San Diego, and it's interesting to see the variety of strengths that come up. And there was one gal who said she came up with strengths that you wouldn't necessarily match with an engineer, just kind of if you were going to go off the cuff. She had more relational strengths, like positivity and communication and empathy. And she's like, man, I don't know. I don't see how these things, I see how they fit in my personal life, but I don't really see how they fit in my job. And I think, for her, that it started a conversation of soul searching, of like, okay, is this really the direction that I want to be going? Am I able to use these strengths in a really positive way and a really productive way? And I think, my encouragement to her was, look at the uniqueness that you offer this role. Look at what you offer that maybe the other people around you don't, and the way that you can rally a team around you and communicate a mission and communicate a message. You might just kind of have a different a different role. And that being said, I think there are, these are all clues to things that you would love. And so if you find yourself in a situation where all the clues are pointing away from what you're doing, then it's okay to follow those clues. I think, it's not a prescriptive tool. There's not like a set of strengths that's good for a teacher or good for an engineer or good for a doctor. But there are some hints that could let you know what are some of the things that you might be good at and might enjoy in those particular environments and those particular careers.
Yeah, I guess what I like about that is that, as with much of life, it's just not a black and white process. Like there's not like you can't pigeonhole somebody because they meet certain numbers and that kind of thing. And I think so much of the world tries to think about things that way. And it's like, it's just not that simple. There's more than one answer to a problem. And I like how this process sort of brings those answers out.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah. So, Becky, I really, really appreciate your time. If people want to find out more about what you do, where do they go?
I can be found over at isogostrong.com. And actually, I associated here with your blog post and this interview, I am going to put out a resource. We talked about StrengthsFinder as being a really great way to understand and know what our strengths are. But there's also just kind of some higher level questions you can start asking yourself. If you're like, I don't know if I really want to spend $15 and take this assessment, and I don't really like assessments, and whatever your holdup is, there's a checklist, a tool that I created that kind of can help you start to get at the things that might be your strengths, kind of give you signs and clues of what your talents and strengths might be, even before you take the dive and take the StrengthsFinder assessment. So we're going to have that available for you here, association with this blog post here on RE Tipster blog. And so you can reach me there. And when you sign up, then I'll be able to, I can send you whatever kind of relevant information you would like or need after that. You can also join the conversation with us over on Facebook and Twitter. Same handle, Isogo Strong, ISOGO Strong, STRONG. And one of my strengths is connectedness, and it really gets me going when I can connect with people and connect with other people and get to see how the language and perspective of strengths has impacted your life or the questions that you continue to have. So I would love for you to connect over there and offer whatever I can to help you on your strengths journey.
Awesome. And you've also got a video podcast going too, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, it's a real fun, that's the most recent kind of fun, exciting thing that I'm doing these days. It's Isogo TV, Live and Work Your Strengths video podcast over on iTunes. You can subscribe there. It's also up on YouTube, so there you can subscribe to get updates on that. There's also a blog post associated with each one as well over at isogostrong.com/reads, READS, like things that you read. And that is a good way if you're just kind of exploring, like, how do I apply my greatest strengths to my everyday work and my everyday life? What does this really mean? What does it look like? Those are some good ways to get started.
Awesome. That is so cool. I really appreciate your time, Becky. I'm going to have links to all of this stuff in the blog post. If you happen to be watching this on YouTube, you can see a link to the blog post right beneath this video in the notes there. So, but yeah, thanks again. I really appreciate your time. And if you want to find out more about Becky and her work and what she does, go check out the website. And yeah.
Thanks, Seth. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching and listening, and we hope to see you again soon.